Hello and welcome to another episode of Sustainability Asia. My name is David Milligan. I'm a banking partner in Norton Rose Fulbright's Hong Kong office. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Etelka Bogardi. Etelka is a financial services regulatory partner in our Hong Kong office. And we're going to talk today about the role of regulators and specifically the banking regulator in Hong Kong can play in sustainability. So Etelka, first question for you. What has the Hong Kong banking regulator, the HKMA, been doing to drive banks' behavior in the sustainability space?
Hi, David. Thanks very much. And thanks for having me today. In Hong Kong even though it's a small jurisdiction, it really is of critical importance in the climate and environmental finance space, particularly due to its really large footprint in the financial services space and as a conduit to mainland China. So last year, the HKMA, the banking regulator, and the SFC, the local securities regulator, formed a cross-agency working group to basically coordinate how environmental and climate factors are managed in the financial services sector in Hong Kong, with a particular focus on climate-related financial risk management. There's a couple of very near-term action points, and the ones I really want to draw to your attention are three here. So Hong Kong will require that climate-related disclosure must be aligned with the TCFD recommendations by no later than 2025. They're working on a common ground taxonomy. And lastly, importantly, Hong Kong is very much in support of the proposal to establish a new global sustainability standard setting board alongside IASB. So lots happening in this space at the moment.
A tremendous amount happening. I think it's fair to say that HKMA have been promoting sustainable banking for a while, though. It's not just recently.
That's right. You know, they've been in this space for a long time, and the MA is heavily involved in Hong Kong's green bond program as well. So Hong Kong is becoming a big center for green bond and green financing in general. So as far back as 2019, the MA released a framework of measures that they plan to implement in 3 phases. So the first phase, which we're well into, is the development of a framework to assess what they call the greenness baseline of individual banks. The second phase essentially is an engagement with the industry on supervisory expectations on green and sustainable banking, with a view to setting really tangible deliverables. And the last phase is essentially, once this target setting process has completed, is the implementation, the monitoring, and the evaluation of banks' performance in this space. So as part of phase 1 in 2020, the MA released a what they call a common assessment framework, which the banks completed on a self-assessment basis. It's essentially it's quite interesting. You should have a read. It's a 60-page questionnaire essentially, and the aim is to collect as much information as possible around the state of development of banks in Hong Kong with respect to climate and environmental risks, essentially under 6 key headings around governance, corporate planning, risk management policies, product services, performance and resources, and importantly also disclosure and communication. So this process was all underway in 2020. And as part of this process, last year, they also released a white paper on green and sustainable banking, where they essentially outline the HKMA's initial views on the supervisory expectations for licensed banks in Hong Kong in addressing climate-related issues. This paper essentially distilled the MA's expectations into 9 guiding principles across 4 broad categories around governance, strategy, risk management, and disclosure. There's no one-size-all approach. These are guiding principles, and the MA has made it clear that they will have regard to the bank's size, the nature of their business, the complexity of their operations, and their stage of development in their capability to address climate-related issues. So this white paper essentially forms part of phase 2 of the 3-phased approach that I talked about. And so since they released the white paper, there's been even more activity. They've issued a circular describing the range of practices currently adopted by major banks, which is essentially designed to help other banks to design appropriate frameworks in managing climate-related risks. And they also launched a pilot climate change stress testing exercise for assessing the resilience in the banking sector as a whole. So as I said, lots going on at the moment.
And what do you foresee of some of the challenges banks will face ahead?
Yeah, so generally, I think that the challenges, as I see them, can be a sort of threefold. But looking at it from a very positive perspective, I can see that these are all being addressed by the initiatives that I've just described internationally as well as on a local level. I think the key is that we need to have consistency across various areas. We need consistency in the taxonomy that is used. What's taxonomy? It's essentially a classification system that helps us determine whether an economic activity in its broader sense is environmentally sustainable. And this needs to be harmonized so that we're comparing apples with apples, not apples with orange. Similarly, we need reliable data and harmonized disclosure rules. And we're seeing some divergence with various jurisdictions around the level of disclosure that is currently required. And lastly, looking at it from a very financial services regulatory hat on, a common approach amongst regulators to prudential risk assessment and stress testing is really important for the banking sector.
Fantastic, Etelka. That's all we have time for, but really good to speak to you. And we'll be back next week with another video.